Today in Pokemon HeartGold, I am going to beat the game using the Togepi-line, and I really mean the Togepi-line. This is not really a Togekiss playthrough, even though you might think that it's going to be since I do allow evolution in these videos, but the methods with which Togepi evolves into Togetic and then eventually into Togekiss are going to take me quite some time to achieve. So, we're starting as a Togepi, and as a baby Pokemon, its base stats are really terrible. 35 HP, 20 attack, 65 defense and special defense, 20 speed, and 40 special attack. So at least we hit much harder with all of our special moves, which when you look at our level up learn set, it's only one move, Ancient Power. Everything else is either physical or a status move, and most of them are status moves. Togepi starts with Growl and Charm, two moves that essentially do the same thing, with Charm being a much better version of Growl. So I am going to have to level up to 6 to get access to Metronome using Struggle. Now, Struggle training in Generation 4 is actually a lot harder than it is in any previous games, because unlike earlier games where Struggle does a percentage of the damage dealt in recoil damage, in this game it deals 25% damage to the Pokemon that uses it. So you can only use Struggle 4 times. If you have an odd amount of health and you're not going to knock yourself out, it is actually rounded down, so you can survive one extra hit on a small amount of HP, but in general this move is just really awful to train with, especially when we have base 20 attack, because Struggle is a physical move. There is one way that I can take advantage of this interaction though, and that is fighting Wild Metapod. Spamming out both Growl and Charm will take me longer than the Metapod depleting its own use of Harden. Because of this, then Metapod will attack Togepi with 65 base defense. I'm not going to get knocked out by the Metapod, so it eventually knocks itself out with recoil damage from Struggle. This gives Togepi a lot of experience because it has the fast growth rate, but not enough to level up to 6. Now I had a choice here. I could go back to the Pokemon Center, heal up, and then do this again against a Metapod to earn more experience. Or I could just finish off depleting my PP and then use Struggle to level up. I opted for the Struggle strategy, but in the end I actually think this was much slower. I think fighting Metapod and just letting them knock themselves out would have been the faster approach, since I have to run away from some Pokemon since they're a little bit scary when they deal damage and Togepi is dealing recoil to itself. Again, this is so much on every turn. Also, when Togepi knocks out the weaker Pokemon, it's not really gaining that much experience, and Metapod is a middle evolution Pokemon, so its experience yields are a lot better than Pokemon like Caterpie and Pidgey. So while I don't think I took the fastest approach to this early game, eventually I level up to 6, learn Metronome, and now I can proceed. I was really worried that I was going to have to use this move for an extended period of time, because through level up, Togepi learns Sweet Kiss at level 10, Yawn at 15, Encore at 19, Follow Me at 24, Wish at 28, and then finally Ancient Power, which can deal direct damage. Beyond that, its level up set doesn't get better. It gets Safeguard, Baton Pass, Double Edge, and Last Resort. I guess the high power normal type moves are kind of nice since they get the same type attack bonus, but when my physical attack is half of what my special attack is, I don't think I'm going to be using physical moves for this playthrough, because Togepi gets good coverage through special moves. Water Pulse, Solar Beam, Psychic, Shadow Ball, Shockwave, Flamethrower, Fire Blast, and Grass Knot. But for now, I don't have access to any of these moves. I'm gonna have to beat the rival using only Metronome. For this challenge, I had him pick Chikorita. I think it's gonna be the most difficult Pokemon for Togepi to go up against, even though it does learn Flamethrower later on, which will make the Bayleaf very easy to manage. However, after you get by the rival in Azalea Town, he's just generally not very good, so I don't expect him to cause problems after that, but in Azalea Town he can cause many issues, and I won't have Flamethrower then, and the Bayleaf is his best Pokemon in that battle. So that's why I made this choice. So now let's see how Metronome does against the Chikorita. Well, turn 1 it gets Magnitude 6, then it rolls Peck for super effective damage, followed by Flame Wheel. This is great. I get a little bit less lucky following that, rolling Thunderbolt, but the powerful special move still does enough and Chikorita goes down. This was the first playthrough I did when I came back from my vacation in BC. I had spent a bunch of time vegetating on the beach with my wife and my parents. It was so much fun. Anyways, my brain was kind of turned off, so I selected the male character, and I didn't think about it until I reached this little cinematic where the female character walks into the grass with her Meryl. This animation is an exclusive to the male protagonist. If you you choose the female protagonist, the male protagonist just walks into the grass and immediately starts the tutorial. So this is why I always play with the female character, to avoid this little time loss. It's not enough for me to restart this run. After all, it has taken me 8 minutes to get to this point, and I don't really expect things to speed up from here. I have to face youngster Mikey using exclusively Metronome. That said, he is the only mandatory trainer before Violet City. He leads with a level 2 Pidgey. Let's see if I can get just as lucky as I did against the rival's Chikorita. Turn 1, Togepi rolls Belly Drum, reducing its HP to red. But this does max out its attack stat. I guess this could be useful, but the Pidgey only has Tackle, so it's going to be doing damage to me every turn. On the next turn, Togepi rolls Skill Swap with Metronome, which is not what I want to be seeing. Pidgey goes for Tackle, bringing Togepi down to 2 hit points. Luckily, it isn't doing enough damage to knock me out, and then Togepi rolls Poison Jab, one-shotting youngster Mikey's first Pokemon. But he still has a level 4 Rattata, and it does have Quick Attack. However, youngster Mikey has no idea what he's doing, choosing Tail Whip instead, lowering my defense. Togepi rolls Water Pulse, but it doesn't do enough damage to knock Rattata out. Youngster Mikey goes for Tail Whip again. Okay, Metronome. And in this case, it rolls Payday, knocking the Rattata out. I can't believe I made it through this one. Now, I've already gone through the TMs that Togepi can learn, but I didn't talk about the HMs that it can learn. And it only gets one move this way, but it's a really useful move for this playthrough, Rock Smash. Since youngster Mikey is the only mandatory trainer before Violet City, I can go there as soon as possible and pick up the TM for Rock Smash, which I can teach to Togepi right away to get access to a direct damage move. Now, Sprout Tower is mandatory in Pokemon HeartGold, and Rock Smash is resisted by these Pokemon, so I'm not doing very much damage to the Bellsprout. But this is where another piece of planning comes into play, because Togepi's ability is Serene Grace. I had a choice between this or Hustle, and Hustle increases my physical attack by 50%, but it does lower Togepi's accuracy when using physical moves by 20%, and I hate having my accuracy lowered, so the attack buff didn't really seem like it was worth it. Also, Serene Grace is going to be far more useful for a longer time during the playthrough. Plus, boosting my attack isn't really that good for the early game when using Rock Smash, since Rock Smash with Serene Grace has a 100% chance to lower the enemy's defense, so it's going to be doing increasing damage on every turn anyway. If I had run Hustle instead, it would sometimes not lower defense, and overall the damage output from Rock Smash I think would be lower, especially against these Bellsprout, which I don't even have enough damage to knock out before Togepi faints. I decided to take the Blackout here since I had already knocked out 2 of the Bellsprout and got experience from them. I think I'm going to need a lot of training in the early game since I don't really have a solution for Bugsy, but I'll talk about him later. For now, I just have to Blackout over and over again to this Bellsprout trainer until eventually I'm a high enough level to knock out his Pokemon before they get me with Vine Whip. I thought this might take 3 Blackouts, but I end up getting through with only 2. I thought that some of the other trainers in the tower might cause problems for Togepi, but this doesn't end up being the case because their teams are all smaller. And honestly, that's pretty good because during this section of the game, while Blackouts do help me work towards higher levels, they don't actually help me working towards my evolution into Togetic, because in order to evolve, Togepi needs to have high friendship. Unlike in later games in the Pokemon series, this threshold is not 160 friendship, it is 220. So I have quite a ways to go until I'm going to evolve. This table shows all the ways that you can gain friendship in Generation 4. Unlike earlier games, the Met location doesn't matter in this game. It wouldn't matter anyways since I met Togepi in Elm's lab. If we look at ways that Togepi can lose friendship, every time it faints, it's going to lose 1 point. And this would be increased if the opponent's Pokemon was at least 30 levels higher than Togepi, but that isn't the case for any of these battles. So the loss from every Blackout is not so substantial, and the gain from leveling up when my friendship is between 0 and 99 is 5 points, and then 3 points between 100 and 199. So right now, every time I level up, I gain 3 points, and if I Blackout, I lose 1, which for me still seemed like a good trade. There's also another good trade that we can make in the early game to gain friendship a little bit faster, and that's when we battle a gym leader, or an Elite Four member, or the champion. Your entire party gains 3 friendship points, 2 friendship points, or 1 friendship point. So battling Falkner, just starting the battle, is going to give Togepi 2 points towards its friendship, and then if I faint, I will lose 1, so the net interaction there is +1 friendship even if I black out. I could knock out the Pidgey over and over again and faint the Pidgeotto. That way I'm gaining both experience towards more levels and friendship towards my evolution. But this kind of training didn't seem particularly efficient to me, so after clearing all of Sprout Tower, I went straight to Falkner's gym with the intent on beating him right away. I didn't want to intentionally black out here spamming a move like Growl over and over again just to buy time for him to finish me off. The question is, will level 13 be enough for Togepi? Pidgey's first. I have to rely on Rock Smash here to knock it out, which is going to take 3 turns, unfortunately meaning the Pidgey can go for Sand Attack, lowering my accuracy before I knock it out. Luckily, Falkner wasn't obsessed with using this move, so he only got 1 accuracy drop before I got the knockout. Next is Pidgeotto. It has Roost, which works to Togepi's advantage, because every time he heals, he loses his Flying type, and then my Rock Smashes become super effective. Plus, as I'm stacking up defense drops, I'm going to be doing more and more damage, meaning Pidgeotto's not going to be able to heal enough with Roost at some point. The only question is, can Togepi survive long enough? And the answer in this fight is no. Since I got a level up and some extra friendship for battling Falkner, I just take this blackout and then fight him again. This time, things start off so much worse for me because the Pidgey goes for Sand Attack 3 times. By the time I reach the Pidgeotto, my accuracy is completely trashed, and I have a 50% chance of hitting Pidgeotto on any given turn. Then, I just get really lucky with Rock Smash. It hits when it needs to. I lower his defense 6 stages, and he keeps using Roost. Thing is, I'm running low on Rock Smash PP. I only have 1 more use, and it turns out that that's all that Togepi needed. It hits and Pidgeotto goes down. Okay, so with Falkner cleared, now we need to start preparing for Bugsy. In Generation 4, his team is quite a bit different than it is in Generation 2. He leads with Scyther, and it knows U-turn instead of Fury Cutter. This is so much worse for Togepi's specific moves, because the Scyther is going to be switching out, sending in Metapod or Kakuna. Kakuna has the potential to poison Togepi, so right away I need to go to the Ruins of Alph, unlock this secret chamber by using the escape rope just outside of it, and then pick up the Pecha Berry. This way I can counter out unlucky status conditions from the Kakuna, hopefully giving me more time against Bugsy. As I head south towards Azalea Town, I'm going to fight every single trainer to get as much experience as I can during this section of the game. This is so I can work towards the move Encore at level 19. I want to ensure that I have this before I take on Bugsy. While I could counter out the Scyther with Yawn, it's not the most effective solution since he could just switch out using U-turn before he falls asleep, and then I wasted a turn and took a bunch of damage. I was hoping that Rock Tomb would be an option, but no, Togepi can't learn this TM, so I'm skipping it in Union Cave. Another option is potentially using Sweet Kiss. This move has 75% accuracy and inflicts confusion. Initially, I thought this wasn't going to be a good option for the same reason that I discounted Yawn, just because him switching out counters out confusion very effectively. But what if we prevent the Scyther from switching entirely? And that can be done using Encore. This move can trap him in either Leer or Focus Energy. Obviously Focus Energy is much better, but Leer could be possible as well. Although then the following Metapod and Kakuna will both deal a lot more damage since Scyther's going to spam a lot of Leers in a row. There's also some good synergy here. I have Rock Smash, which lowers defense. I can't unlearn Rock Smash, even though it's really bad against Bugsy's Pokemon. I have to wait till the move deleter, which is in Blackthorn City, so Rock Smash is going to be hanging around for a long time. Because I have to have it on my set, I can pair this move's defense drops with Sweet Kiss and self-inflicted confusion damage. Then, I can use Encore to trap his Scyther so that I have time to set up Sweet Kiss and lower its defense by a couple stages. And I decided to keep Metronome just in case the Scyther does go for Leer, because then it might be faster to knock out all of his Pokemon just by getting lucky. Togepi learns Encore in the place of Growl, so now I have my moveset for Bugsy prior to fighting Proton in Slowpoke Well. This guy actually ends up being really annoying. I tried to fight him using only Metronome, just hoping that 6 uses of the move would give me what I needed to knock out both the Zubat and the Coughing. I really didn't want to backtrack out of the cave, heal, and then come back in to fight him again with Rock Smash. This move is obviously terrible against the Zubat and the Coughing. But in the end, I lose once, and I do have to backtrack, so kind of frustrating. Coming back in with Rock Smash though, the defense drops give me what I need to finish off his poison type Pokemon. Alright, there are more of these, because Bugcatcher Benny, unlike in Generation 2, is mandatory in Pokemon HeartGold. He's got a Weedle, a Kakuna, and a Beedrill, and all of them have a double resistance to Rock Smash, so its effective power is 10, and it takes a long time to knock these Pokemon out. This is another example of why Serene Grace is so effective for Togepi in the early game. While this section has been incredibly slow, after all, I've spent more than half an hour trying to get to the second gym leader, it still would be so much worse if I didn't have Rock Smash. But that's where I want to just briefly mention the fact that Togepi could have extra sensory. I did think about giving it this as a move from the very beginning of the playthrough, because the Togepi egg that you receive from Professor Elm's assistant knows extra sensory when you hatch it in this game. I actually ended up using Togepi and Togetic throughout my entire first ever Pokemon HeartGold playthrough, roughly a decade ago now. It was really good because it had extra sensory, a base 80 power move from early on in the game, and since I was playing through the game very slowly, just trying to enjoy myself, I ended up hatching my Togepi egg far before I ever took on Bugsy. Before I did this run, I asked for some advice over on my solo running Discord. By the way, check out the link in the description if you want to get access to a bunch of the software that I use for these solo challenges. I haven't released everything for Generation 4 yet, but it is coming in the near future. You'll also be able to weigh in on questions that I have about these runs before I do them, so that if you think I should be running a Pokemon in a very specific way, you can at least give your opinion. And a bunch of people weighed in here. However, I think what Perky Penguin said at the very end is most key. I think if I gave Togepi one of its egg moves, I would set a bad standard for the remainder of this series. What about other Pokemon that get exceptional egg moves? For example, some Pokemon could get access to a move like Nasty Plot through egg moves, or Dragon Dance. Those moves would dramatically change how the playthrough goes, and give those Pokemon and their lines much better playthrough results. But if I restrict these moves, then those Pokemon are going to get much worse results, but if I give Togepi extra sensory, then its results in comparison to them would just not really be fair. So in the end, I decided to play the vanilla Togepi, even though it is much worse. And I guess it made the early game much more interesting. I had to use Metronome a little bit, and we're getting to see Serene Grace in combination with Rock Smash, which is just something that I wouldn't have done with extra sensory. I never would have taught Rock Smash, because having to keep this move on my set until Blackthorn City is going to be a disadvantage for Togepi, because once I clear Bugsy, it's going to be able to learn a lot of really good moves. One of them being Flamethrower, which is just so badly positioned. I would have loved to have this for Bugsy, but without it, we're going to have to resort to some luck. As this fight starts, I want to mention the fact that Togepi can learn Flash, but when I was checking my moveset, I was remembering Generation 2 where Flash was an HM, and I couldn't see Flash listed beside Rock Smash. That's because Flash in this game is a TM. I just didn't check higher up on the list. So this move could have been useful against Bugsy here to make things easier, but I didn't know that I could access it, so that's why I never went for it as part of my strategy. Anyways, Scyther uses U-turn, it does a bunch of damage, and then Metapod comes out. I actually rolled a decent Metronome here, getting Fly against Metapod, but in the end, it's just not going to be enough. Scyther switches back in, it uses U-turn, then Kakuna comes out, which has Poison Sting, and Scyther's eventually just going to come back out and finish Togepi. So I took the reset now, knowing that I couldn't win. And I'm going to keep doing that for all the future attempts against Bugsy. Typically in these solo challenges, I like to play until my Pokemon faints because it gives us nice footage to cut between, clearly illustrating to you how many times I've lost the battle. But in this case, I'm not going to do that, so just watch the reset or fault counter up in the top left if you're curious how many times I've lost. In the next battle, I'm able to trap the Scyther using Focus Energy over and over again. Now, I need to get very lucky. Sweet Kiss needs to hit the Scyther, and then the Scyther needs to hit itself in confusion while I'm stacking up Rock Smashes. And I hope that Encore lasts long enough so that Scyther isn't going to start attacking. In this case though, it wears off, Scyther didn't hit itself enough, and then Togepi goes down. When the Scyther goes for U-turn on turn 1, I'm just going to reset since I'm in a really bad position for the remainder of the battle. I want to trap the Scyther, get Sweet Kiss, lower its defense, have it knock itself out, and then deal with both of his Cocoon Pokemon. We get to see the third scenario from Scyther here, where it goes for Leer on turn 1 and I trap it using the defense lowering move. Initially, this seems like it could work, but then Scyther attacks when Togepi has -6 defense, and obviously this is a one-shot. By the way, I realized that I had forgotten the Pecha Berry up until this point. Luckily, it wasn't relevant since since I hadn't made it by the Scyther, but I am so glad I caught this before I knocked out the Scyther, because making it to the Kakuna, then getting poisoned and not knocking out his cocoons would feel so bad. As I reset more and more to Bugsy, I started to question my approach. Maybe this isn't the right solution to defeat him. Leveling to 33, even with the fast growth rate in this section of the game, is kind of just not an option. It is technically possible, but I think it would take me roughly 1 hour to do that, and overall it would be far less efficient than just resetting here for luck. I don't really have any other options until level 28 where we learn Wish, but I don't even think this healing move would give Togepi what it needs in order to win. Potentially, I could be using Yawn for sleep tactics, but I don't have that available to me anymore because I unlearned the move. I would have to restart the entire playthrough in order to get Yawn back at this point in the run. So despite the fact that I really wanted to use a different strategy at this point, I do think this is the best one, and I just doubled down, continuing to reset until finally I get the luck I need. Scyther hits itself a bunch in confusion with Sweet Scent, and because of my defense drops at -6, it knocks itself out. Okay, please say that I'm able to knock out the Metapod and the Kakuna. I had my defense lowered by 1 stage, but that isn't so catastrophic that I think I should be fine. I go for Sweet Kiss against the Metapod to hopefully stack up damage against it a little bit faster. Then I use Rock Smash, and I am able to knock out Bugsy's second Pokemon doing this. He also burns one of his healing items on it, which is better than against the Kakuna, which is next, and it has Poison Sting. I'm just hoping it's not able to inflict the status condition early on, and it's not because Sweet Kiss comes through for me. Kakuna hits itself twice in confusion, and then I've had time to have Rock Smash stack up, but it's not enough, because Kakuna resists this move, and I run out of PP. So I either need to win with Sweet Kiss, or I need to win with Metronome. Going for Metronome is potentially risky, because Togepi could roll a move like Self-Destruct or Explosion. Detonating like that after knocking out the Scyther for the first time would be incredibly painful. That said, knocking the Kakuna out using Sweet Kiss is gonna take a while, and it's not a guarantee. I established the status condition, but then I decided to roll for Metronome and just hope. In this case, it pays off for me because Togepi lands Mega Punch. Okay, so we beat Bugsy. I thought that he was going to be brutal. He was pretty bad. That said, the rival also is kind of awful because he leads with Ghastly, and we only have normal and fighting type moves. I have to knock out the Ghastly using either Sweet Scent or Metronome. I think Metronome's the better solution here since it has better upside. It could one-shot the Ghastly with a powerful move like Psychic, or it could also roll Fury Cutter and deal almost no damage. Also, this is not like Rollout. Unfortunately, I do not get to use Fury Cutter again on the next turn. Instead, I just use a bunch of different moves which are kind of bad. Then Ghastly uses Curse, and unlike in Generation 2, where if you knock out the enemy's Pokemon you don't take damage from this status condition, that isn't how it works in Generation 4. So this is a reset. Sometimes it makes sense blocking out to the rival, but that's only when we defeat one of his Pokemon and gain experience, which happens in the second battle. After rolling Magnet Bomb and knocking out the Ghastly, then the Zubat finishes off Togepi. So are there better options available to me? And I think the answer is just no. Metronome is my best move against all of the rival's Pokemon, with maybe the exception of Bayleaf, who I could trap in a move like Reflect or Poison Powder using Encore, then set up Sweet Kiss and do the Rock Smash strategy. That said, I can also just roll amazing moves every turn with Metronome. Ice Beam on Ghastly, Blizzard on Zubat, which actually hits. Bayleaf comes in, but I did get hit by Curse. I roll Twin Needle here, which is super effective, but it's not doing enough damage. After that, Togepi faints. But again, I'll take the blackout for the experience. I got lucky in the next battle, Flash Cannon into attack order, knocking out the Ghastly, and then I also finished the Zubat, moving on to the Bayleaf again. So while this experience is nice and it's trainer boosted, it's still not really working us towards a faster victory. I'm just shooting for a luck out with Metronome. Like, Thunderbolt on the Ghastly for a one-shot. I get confused against the Zubat, but then I hit Night Slash into Brine to finish it. Bayleaf comes in. This time I go for Metronome, rolling Bone Rush, which hits a decent number of times. Bayleaf goes for Synthesis, and then Togepi rolls Will-O-Wisp. This is amazing. Bayleaf's only attacking move is Razor Leaf, which is physical in Generation 4. Because of the burn, it's going to be doing decreased damage with every one of its hits. Togepi continues to get lucky, rolling Bug Buzz, a special move that deals so much damage to the Bayleaf. Even if it heals with Synthesis now, it's eventually going to get knocked out. I try to mess it up using Sweet Kiss. This luckily works for me, and Bayleaf goes down because of the status condition. Okay, the absolutely awful early game is now all behind us. Inside the forest, I can talk to the move tutor and teach Togepi Headbutt. So now we have a reliable same type attack bonus move, but it still leverages Togepi's weaker attacking stat, so I want something better than this to use for the remainder of the game. And luckily that's right around the corner. Inside Goldenrod City, I can play Voltorb Flip, winning every single round as per my rules, earning myself a total of 24,000 coins, which I use to purchase the Flamethrower TM, 2 substitute TMs in case I need one later on, the rest TM, as well as the Silk Scarf to boost the damage of normal type moves. Now I'm going to be using Flamethrower throughout the next section of the game, so I did backtrack to get the Charcoal in Azalea Town after catching both of the Farfetch'd. This boosts the power of Flamethrower by 20%, which makes it a really good special move at this point in the game, with an effective power of 114.5. Also, remember with Serene Grace, I have a 20% chance to burn the opponent whenever I use this move. I think we can only call this section of the game one thing. It was a moveset revolution, and I think it gives Togepi everything it needs to have success against Whitney, who's next. Clefairy is first. I decided to go for Substitute here, block some of its weak moves, and then Flamethrower for the knockout, which just barely can't two-shot at level 24. She uses her Super Potion here, which I guess is better than on the Miltank, which is next. It goes for Stomp, breaking my Substitute, then Flamethrower crits, dealing massive damage, but it doesn't look like I'm gonna get the KO with my next hit. Miltank survives on low health. She has another Super Potion healing. I burn with my next Flamethrower, but I didn't know that the Miltank has a Lumberry, so it heals the status condition right away, and continues using Stomp, which is inflicting massive damage, and Togepi just barely doesn't have the health or defense it needs to survive. If I had got one more turn in that battle, I would have been victorious. I would have really liked to leverage Headbutt's increased flinch chance during this fight, but unfortunately, Togepi is slower than the Miltank, so I can't really use it when it counts. I wasn't sure if Rock Smash might be better against the Miltank, lowering its defense, slowly stacking up more and more damage, and then using Headbutt as a finishing move. But after 2 defense drops, Headbutt still just isn't doing enough. That's another reset. I tried this strategy one more time, but it doesn't work out, so I reverted back to the Flamethrower strategy. I think inflicting a burn on the Miltank is going to be more effective because Stomp doing less damage will give Togepi more time. Turns out there's another way for me to get the 1-turn advantage that I needed during this fight, and that's that Togepi's Substitute can sometimes survive the damage that Miltank is doing with Stomp. When this happens, my Substitute then takes an additional hit, which causes it to break. That gives me the turn advantage and allows Flamethrower to slowly knock the Miltank out, and it didn't even need to get the double burn to use up the Lumberry along the way. Okay, so Whitney ended up being a lot rougher than I was hoping for. By the way, the reason I wasn't constantly blacking out to trainers like Whitney or Bugsy for more experience is because I don't really want to black out that much during this playthrough to save as much friendship as I can. Right now, Togepi has 165, so it is still quite far away from evolving into Togetic, and that evolution just can't come soon enough. I really want to say goodbye to Togepi's awful stats. North of Goldenrod City, fighting Fire Breather Walt, I end up losing here. It's really frustrating, mostly because I activated Flame Body on my first hit against his initial Magmar. Then Togepi can't do much damage because I'm not going to be using Flamethrower against Fire-type Pokemon, and I have to use physical moves because my move pool is so limited. So I end up having to black out here. Togepi is so bad. It's really cute though. I actually love the design of Togepi. I feel like it is just emblematic of Generation 2 and the Johto games. First of all, because it was one of the initial Pokemon released to the public that was going to be an additional Pokemon above the 151 Pokemon that we had all come to know and love as kids. But I think there's a deeper detail here that we really need to focus on. If you look at the Johto Pokedex, most of these Pokemon are just cute and round. I don't know what they were doing, but all of them are just so much cuter than the Pokemon introduced in Generation 1. There aren't as many Pokemon that are intimidating and scary like Charizard or Nidoking or Rhydon. There's just a lot of cute and round stuff like Togepi and all of the other babies, Natu, Politoed, Jumpluff. The list just goes on and on. I skip Fire Breather Walt this time. Let's head into National Park and talk about this location. It's a pretty unfortunate place for Togepi. First of all, I'm going to pick up the Quick Claw. This can help us outspeed stuff. Initially, I thought that when we evolved into Togetic, our speed was going to get much faster, but no, Togetic actually isn't that fast. I'll talk about its base stats soon. The real reason the National Park is such an unfortunate location is because this is where you get access to the Shiny Stone. However, the finite method to pick it up requires Rock Climb, which is only available after I defeat all of the Kanto gym leaders. And there are repeatable methods. Number one, I can get it on Route 14, which is in Kanto from Birdkeeper Josh. That requires a phone call and a bunch of luck as a result. I could also get it from the bug catching contest, but I would need to win the first prize. And I also need to have the National Pokedex. The Pokeathlon Dome is the other way that we could get access to this, but that also requires the National Pokedex and 3,000 points. So yeah, once we evolve into Togetic, we're essentially going to have to play the rest of the run until we get Rock Climb with it. Game Freak seemed determined to make players not play the game with Pokemon that weren't available during Gold, Silver, and Crystal. I don't know why. The new Pokemon make the game more interesting, Game Freak. Let us use them. We want to use them. They're new and exciting. By the way, this is how I feel about modern generation Pokemon games as well. They introduce some cool new regional variant, and then the very next game that they release, the regional variant isn't available for use. It's always really disappointing when this happens. Or when new Pokemon that were just previously introduced to the series are not available in the very next generation. I guess this is a symptom of the National Dex being too big and them not being able to include every single species in every single game, although it still does disappoint me. Okay, I have to fight the Sudowoodo. I like to defeat this thing. It feels more in the spirit of the challenge. In the end, it's not really difficult for Togepi since I'm using Rock Smash, but it could have gone wrong since Sudowoodo does know Mimic and it steals Rock Smash early into the fight. After that, the double battle with the normal types is not a problem and I make my way into Ecruteak City. Here, I don't have to fight the Kimono girls yet. Luckily, there is just one Rocket with a Coughing in their place. He's really easy for Togepi to defeat. It feels nice to be on a bit of a roll at this point in the game since the early portions of this playthrough have been absolutely awful. But the rival in Burned Tower is not going to go well for Togepi right now. I rolled the dice here hoping that I would be able to fight him and his Ghastly would just go for Mean Look on turn 1 instead of using Curse. But I went for Curse, so this is going to be a reset. That said, my moves do stack up really well against his team. Flamethrower gives Togepi an option against Ghastly for direct damage. I have super effective damage against the Magnemite and the Bayleaf, and Zubat isn't really that scary. Still, I'm going to do some training before I come back to fight the rival again. I'm not going to be able to get the outspeed on Ghastly, but maybe leveling up is going to increase Flamethrower's damage so that it'll be more reliable once I finish off the Ghastly. Alternatively, I could get a lot of Friendship and evolve into a Togetic, but that's going to take too long. After beating all the mandatory trainers in the Lighthouse, Togepi still is under 200 Friendship, and I make my way back to fight the rival again. This time around, Ghastly does go for Mean Look on turn 1, so I'm able to establish Substitute, which blocks future curses. Ghastly goes down, Bayleaf comes in, I'm able to finish it with 2 uses of Flamethrower, and then the Zubat and Magnemite are both simple one-hits. Okay, in the Ecruteak City gym, Togepi gets to level 33. Remember that I can't delete Rock Smash, so I had to give up Headbutt here in order to get Ancient Power. And I think it's very important to do this. Substitute is going to be useful against Morty, and I think that Ancient Power is going to be the MVP move for the Togepi line. With Serene Grace, it has a 20% chance to Omni Boost, which is honestly pretty good. Rolling for the 10% chance to get 1 boost is often the best strategy for a fast defeat of a really tricky trainer, but when you have 20% with a move like this, it just changes the math entirely. Ancient Power only has 5 PP, so when it has a 10% chance to Omni Boost, it's usually the case that you're only going to get 1 boost for a fight. But with a 20% chance and with 3 PP ups at 8 PP, I think I'm going to be able to roll for 2 boosts in some fights, and that's going to dramatically reduce the amount of training that I need to put in. I can also use my rare candies earlier on since I think I can rely on this move for a win against Red at the very end of the game. Although the flying type, which is going to get added on to Togepi, might actually be my undoing since he starts with Pikachu. We'll have to wait and see. For now, let's take on Morty. Ghastly's up first. I was hoping for turn 1 Mean Look here instead of Curse, because I don't move first. I'm able to establish Substitute because of that, and then go to town using Ancient Power trying to knock out the Ghastly. Unfortunately, no Omni Boost, and the Ghastly does go for Spite, draining all of my PP, so I have to use Flamethrower from here on out. That said, Morty's entire team is just terrible against Pokemon that are normal types with Substitute in place. The only moves that they can hit me with are things like Dream Eater, but they would have to put me to sleep, and I have a Substitute, so that doesn't work, meaning this Haunter can do nothing to Togepi. The Gengar that follows has a little bit of a better situation because it can use Sucker Punch for some damage, but this isn't doing enough damage to break my Substitute, so I simply knock it out with Flamethrower and move on to the final Haunter, which can use Sucker Punch, but I'm doing more than enough to finish it, and in general it's just not a very good Pokemon. So Morty ends up being the easiest gym leader in today's playthrough, at least until this point. Now I have to choose. Do I go and fight Chuck next, or do I fight Price? And I think Price makes a lot more sense since we have a type disadvantage against Chuck, and if I put in a little bit more training against mandatory trainers, I should get enough friendship to evolve into Togetic over the next section of the game. So fighting the Rockets in the HQ makes sense right now. If I went to Chuck and I wanted to evolve into Togetic, I would have to do optional training instead, and because I have Ancient Power, I want to avoid that. Unfortunately, the red Gyarados is too much for Togepi to deal with. I did get an Omni Boost here, which I thought was going to give me an easy win. Unfortunately, though, I run out of Ancient Power PP, so then I have to use Flamethrower. I thought I might get it. I did get a burn here, but then Gyarados goes for Dragon Rage and finishes Togepi. In the next battle, I just restored my PP using an item, and then I can spam Ancient Power and finish off the Gyarados. I should have done this first time around, but I tried to luck through. It is a wild Pokemon. It's typically not that good. Okay, Rocket plotline. This section of the game finally brings with it enough trainers to get Togepi to the 220 friendship threshold that it needs to evolve into Togetic. For base stats, it now has 55 HP, 40 attack, and 85 defense. Its speed stat is 40. I really thought that Togetic was much faster than this. Luckily though, its special attack gets a major boost, 80, and its special defense is 105. I didn't realize how good of a special wall Togetic was. I think that's mostly because there's no NPCs that use this Pokemon during a regular playthrough, so I've never needed to think about my strategies against it. And I have not played competitive Pokemon before, if you're ever wondering. No, I haven't. I toyed around with Showdown a little bit in Generation 1, but that's really all I've done. So this evolution didn't bring speed with it, meaning the Quick Claw is going to continue being effective in this playthrough. But it did bring with it the Flying type. Initially you would think that this would be really useful, we'd get some same type attack bonus moves through a level up, but the answer is no. Still essentially the same level up set, although Togetic gets Magical Leaf as a reminder move. Yes, even if you started the game with Togetic, it would not start with Magical Leaf because that is the first of 5 moves that it begins at level 1 with. I guess starting with Metronome would prevent the struggle training early on. That's nice, but overall the early game would play very similarly to what we just had to experience with Togepi. Of course, the better stats would all help. Through TM and HM, our set does expand, but not that much. We get access to Silverwind, but this move won't be useful even though I can pick it up for free in the department store, and I did earlier on. However, Ancient Power is just better in terms of type effectiveness. On the Pokemon DB type effectiveness calculator, if you put Fire, Ghost, and Bug moves together, there are 2 Pokemon that they are not very effective against, and 679 that they are normally effective against. However, if you swap out the Bug type move for a Rock type move, all of these numbers get better. 0 Pokemon that we're not very effective with, and 570 that we have normal effectiveness against. The Ghost move that I'm going to pair Ancient Power and Flamethrower with is Shadow Ball. However, I haven't taught it yet because I want to put it in the place of Rock Smash, and we need to get to Blackthorn City before I can do that. To make it there, I'm going to need to finish off Price, Chuck, and Jasmine, as well as completing the Rocket plotline, which in HeartGold is mandatory to make it to Blackthorn City, unlike in Generation 2. So let's take on Price next. I think this one should be fine. Seal is first. Right away I set up Substitute so it can't lower my speed using Icy Wind. I was a little bit worried with how much damage his Ice type move would do, but I end up getting 2 Omni Boosts from Ancient Power right away, and then I knock out Seal. From here, this fight should be pretty easy. I'm able to one-shot the Dugong using Ancient Power, and I get a third Omni Boost. By the way, this level of boosting is unheard of when Ancient Power has 10%. Serene Grace is really making this fight so much easier. Piloswine is last, and of course, Flamethrower is an easy one-shot. I didn't think I would be able to rely on Omni Boosts against Chuck, but then Ancient Power boosts me right away against the Primeape. Okay, I really love Serene Grace. This is a great combo. Poliwrath is next. Now, I don't have good moves against it. I have to either use Rock Smash, Ancient Power, or Flamethrower. In this case, I think that Flamethrower is actually the best move. It has a chance to burn, and it has the highest effective power out of all of my moves. I could use Ancient Power for more Omni Boosts, and I did use up the final 2 PP, getting one more Omni Boost along the way. Because of that, when I go back to using Flamethrower, it's doing decent damage, and yeah, I beat Poliwrath. So, Chuck, first attempt as well. And we don't even need Omni Boosts for Jasmine because Substitute turn 1 block her Thunder Waves. Flamethrower then one-shots both of the Magnemites. I thought I might 2-hit the Steelix, but no, it's just a one-shot. Togetic easily melted away her Steel types. Okay, I can feel it. The pace of this run is definitely improving now that I've evolved. Unfortunately for me, against Executive Petrol, I do run into a little bit of a challenge. I get an Omni Boost here with Ancient Power, of course I do. I have Serene Grace. This is what I should expect from here on out. Actually, I get a second Omni Boost. The issue is just that I run out of PP on all of my special moves, and because of that, I'm having to use Rock Smash, which ends up giving Togetic 1 reset. If I had been able to teach Shadow Ball in the place of Rock Smash, I would have won this. I guess I could have taught it in the place of Substitute, but I'm being a little bit stubborn holding on to that move. After all, it can block things like Self-Destruct or Smokescreen during this battle, so typically I like to have it for Petrol. In the next fight, I get not 1, not 2, but 3 Omni Boosts. I don't even need these. They're actually wasting time at this point printing a bunch of text which I would like to avoid, because without even 1 Omni Boost, Flamethrower was able to one-shot all of the coughing. Okay, the rival in the underground is another chance for me to complement Ancient Power. The fact that he leads with Golbat gives me a chance to set up for an Omni Boost early on into the fight. There are a bunch of battles in the remainder of the playthrough that are like this, where flying Pokemon or Pokemon that are weak to Rock-type moves come in initially. In a lot of cases, with Ancient Power having 10% chance to boost, it's not that good. You usually never get the Omni Boost, but in cases like this, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get one. However, in this case, I don't. Still though, the rival's team is really bad. I'm able to finish off the Magnemite in 1 hit, then he sends in Sneasel, giving me more chances for Omni Boosts. But no, I don't get them. Darn. Still, not needed. Togetic is totally fine against the Meganium as well as the following Haunter. All of the executives as I make my way up Radio Tower are easy for Togetic to manage, especially Archer, the final executive. Ancient Power is super effective against his Houndour as well as his Houndoom, and of course, I get an Omni Boost. So the road to Blackthorn City is finally cleared. I make my way through Ice Path, picking up a PP up on my way, maxing out Ancient Power's usages. And then in Blackthorn City, I finally stop by the move deleter to get rid of Rock Smash. In its place, I put Shadow Ball, which is going to give me better neutral damage against targets that resist Flamethrower. Also, by default, Shadow Ball has a 20% chance to lower special defense, so now it has a 40% chance to lower special defense. And I believe that both of these factors are going to be helpful against Clare. Shadow Ball's neutral damage and special defense drops are going to be my go-to for 3 of her 4 Pokemon. Luckily for me, her lead is a flying type, and you know what that means. Gyarados is first. I'm going to be going for Omni Boosts here. I tried to establish Substitute, but this is a terrible idea. Then the Gyarados just breaks my Substitute using Dragon Rage, and I have low health by the time Dragonair comes in. It uses Thunder Wave, and despite 1 Omni Boost, I'm then moving second, and Claire's Pokemon are able to finish me off. If I just attack the Gyarados right away and 2-shot with Ancient Power with no Omni Boosts, I still make it to the Dragonair with low health, and then it can just finish me with weak moves like Dragon Pulse. Now, I have an embarrassing misplay here against her in the next few fights. Against the Dragonairs, whenever I arrive here with green health, if the Gyarados has dropped the ball or I got a critical hit, something like that, I can just set up Substitute and block the Dragonair from going for Thunder Wave. But I hadn't used Substitute in quite some time, and I had figured out that it wasn't useful against Gyarados, Gyarados, and then I had kind of locked into the fact that I just want to Omni Boost and get more stats to one-shot the Dragonairs, but that's really not the way that this works. If I had set up Substitute, I would have had more turns to Omni Boost with Ancient Power, preserving my speed and giving me the chance for more success later into the fight. After all, her second Dragonair is just as likely to use Thunder Wave as her first one is. I reset here 4 more times. I can't believe that. Actually, it's so bad. This is terrible play. Anyways, when I finally figured it out, I actually just didn't do it. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm still using Ancient Power against Dragonair. I have equipped the Shell Bell, so I'm gaining back small amounts of health on every turn. And hilariously, even without using Substitute, this strategy just is enough. I Omni Boost 2 times, Kingdra comes out, and it's just barely not able to knock out Togetic, and finally I win, even though I wasn't using the right strategy. Clare really didn't need to be that painful, but the Kimono girls, there isn't much that I can do here. Against the Umbreon, using Flamethrower is kind of bad, because if I burn the Umbreon, then it inflicts a burn back at me because of Synchronize, its ability. Then I am burned for the rest of the fight against all of the other Kimono girls. I can't black out here and then fight the remaining people. You have to fight all 5 of them in a row and beat all 5 of them in a row. It's just like the Elite Four. Also, Churro, it's great to have you here. I'm sure everyone appreciates your little meows. Oh my gosh, she's gonna sit down on the couch beside me. This is so cute. Anyways, back to the Kimono girls. Yeah, Espeon's also bad. It can do a ton of damage with its attack, even though our special defense is quite high. If I make it by it, then Flareon comes out, which can go for Fire Blast, potentially burning Togetic, and there are still 2 more evolutions to beat after this. Jolteon can do super effective damage with Thunderbolt, and Togetic faints. Or Espeon could just crit me with Psychic, knocking out Togetic again. Now, does it make sense to level up for this fight? Well, not really, but there is an item that's really good against these trainers. If I go back to the Lake of Rage and surf across it to this hidden area, I can pick up the choice specs. Since I'm only ever going to use one move against every single one of these evolutions, I can get the 50% boost to my special attack stat with no downside. Still though, this feat is too much for Togetic. I keep resetting here. The Jolteon got me again. And losing to her is really bad because it wastes so much time. That said, I can just black out here. I don't really care about my friendship anymore, and defeating the evolutions does give decent experience. I end up depositing all of my HM users and then blackout training against the Kimono girls. I hadn't thought about doing this in the past, but I guess this is kind of a good way to train if you can't beat them easily and you're looking for a little bit of luck. And I definitely needed a little bit of luck here. I finished off the Flareon and I was in a really good position with green health, but I can't one-shot the Jolteon yet even with the choice specs. It's able to leave me on orange health for the Vaporeon. I was so scared. I thought the Vaporeon was going to have an ice type move, and it does, Aurora Beam, which is going to be super effective. Shadow Ball is not able to one-shot, so I will have to survive at least 1 hit. The Vaporeon does not choose Aurora Beam, instead going for Surf. Togetic survives on 8 hit points, and I thought this had given me the win. However, then the Vaporeon goes for Quick Attack, attacking Togetic 1 more time. Yeah, and I survive on 1 hit point, giving me another move with Shadow Ball, finally finishing the Kimono girls. The rival before the league is honestly pretty easy. He starts with Sneasel, giving me time to Omni Boost, then Magneton is a one-shot with Flamethrower. Still no Omni Boosts, but it doesn't really matter because Shadow Ball one-shots the Kadabra. Then Golbat comes in, more opportunities to Omni Boost. Unfortunately, none, but like the previous rival fight, I just don't need them here. I finish off the Meganium with Fire-type damage, and Haunter's all that's left. I crit with Shadow Ball, and that's that. Now, Togetic is ready for the Elite Four. Will is first. I expected this fight to be very easy. I have Ancient Power, which I can use to Omni Boost, but Shadow Ball is also super effective, and I just figured that it was going to be enough. There are some downsides here though. While I can one-shot the Xatu with Shadow Ball, the Jinx survives. This is because I'm using special damage instead of physical damage. Jinx then goes for Lovely Kiss, putting Togetic to sleep, and it snoozes too long, getting hit by Ice Punch multiple times, which ends up in a defeat. Okay, so what I should have done, I guess, is Omni Boost on the Xatu, then one-shot the Jinx and outspeed because of the Omni Boost. From there, the rest of Will's Pokemon are really easy to knock out, even though he has bulky Pokemon like Exeggutor and Slowbro. The thing is, I'm just really over-leveled at this point, and that's not because I've been using rare candies or doing a lot of extra training. That's purely because of the fast growth rate. It is really a major advantage in the late game of these solo challenges. Pokemon with it start to level up so quickly. Koga's next, and and since he's a poison type specialist, I think this is a better moment than any to mention the fact that Togepi, Togetic, and Togekiss are all fairy types. They have their normal type replaced, which honestly seems like a major advantage because I'm not using any normal type moves. Return even hasn't been useful in this playthrough, and Return is typically used in pretty much every run. But because the fairy type didn't exist in Generation 4, I don't have to worry about a type disadvantage during this fight. That said, Muck still takes 3 hits to knock out, and I was playing very aggressively here, not resetting Substitute after it was broken. Unfortunately, this ends up being Togetic's undoing, because Toxic hits, and with the increasing damage every turn, I'm just not able to make it through his remaining 3 Pokemon. Thing is, this is just player error. There is no reason to lose to Koga. I could just re-establish the Substitute, but like the battle against Clare, I'm forgetting to do that. This time around though, Muck doesn't poison me. Venomoth comes out, I go for Flamethrower, and despite my type disadvantage, I am able to pull through with a win against Koga. Now, technically Togetic has a type advantage against Bruno, who's next, but that's not really the case. He has some moves that are super effective against Togetic, like Ice Punch and Rock Slide, so here the flying type is really a liability against his team members rather than an advantage. That feels so wrong. I really wish we got something like Air Slash earlier into this run, but keep that in mind for later on. It's not relevant right now. I'm gonna have to muscle my way through Bruno just using special moves. And there isn't even really a place here to Omni Boost since his Pokemon resist Ancient Power. So instead, I'm using a combination of Flamethrower and Shadow Ball. I'm able to make it to the Machamp with just under half health remaining, and then I go for Flamethrower, but it's not doing half to Bruno's Ace. He retaliates with a Rock Slide doing massive damage, and I'm not able to knock out his Ace, giving it a chance to go for Cross Chop, which crits and knocks out Togetic. I also play this fight with a completely different strategy. The Hitmontop likes to go for counter on turn 1, meaning I can sometimes set up Substitute for free here. Then Bruno switches out Hitmontop, I guess because it has Dig? I'm not really sure why. He sends in Onix next, which I can knock out, maintaining my Substitute for the Hitmonchan that's next. I'm able to block its super effective damage as a result, and then I have Flamethrower with better damage against his Machamp. While it is still able to do half damage to Togetic, I think I have enough health left over for the remainder of the battle. And since Bruno switched out his Hitmontop, he has to send it back in, giving me another chance to set up Substitute again before Hitmonlee comes in. And I think this was important because I have to knock it out over 2 turns, and it is able to break my Substitute, but in the end, because of his AI switching the Hitmontop in and out and my increased levels, Togetic's able to win against Bruno. Karen is not really that good in Pokemon HeartGold. She doesn't have Sand Attack like she does in Generation 2, instead having Double Team, and it doesn't prevent me from getting 1 Omni Boost, which is all I need to one-shot her remaining Pokemon. Okay, Lance, this is another opportunity for Omni Boosts right away because Gyarados leads. Also, being a purely special attacker means I don't have to worry about the Gyarados' Intimidate right away. It's really convenient not having to work around that. Luckily for me, after the Gyarados goes down, he sends in his Aerodactyl next, meaning he's not going to try to paralyze me with the Dragonites right away. I think this is kind of good, at least that's what I was thinking about initially. Then I make it to the Dragonite, and you can see that I'm not thinking about the Substitute Thunder Wave interaction. I'm not setting up Substitute, instead just trying to attack, and of course this is not the correct choice. What I should be doing instead is making it to the Dragonite and then trying to establish Substitute. If my health is too low and Dragonite sees that it's going to get a knockout with a move like Thunder or Blizzard, then it's going to prioritize attacking, which is the scenario that happens in the second fight against Lance. So I need to be able to make it to the Dragonite with decent health. One way to do this is the Shell Bell gaining back a little bit of health every turn that I'm attacking. Another way, of course, would be preserving more health, getting an Omni Boost early on into the fight against the Gyarados. But this just isn't happening. But something else occurs that gives me the luck that Togetic needs. Instead, Lance heals his Aerodactyl, giving me more health to sap with the Shell Bell. This item tends to not be amazing in these solo challenges since you gain back so little health every turn, but sometimes that's all you need. Then Dragonite's going for Thunder Wave, and I can set up Substitute blocking the status move. Since his second Dragonite also has this move, it's locked into the same problem that the first one was. I finish it off, and then the Ace Dragonite comes out, which is taking less damage, so I am going to 3-shot, but that doesn't matter. Even though Outrage breaks my Substitute, there's only 1 Pokemon left, Charizard. Shadow Ball scores a critical hit, and Lance is defeated. I'm starting to get close to evolving Togetic into Togekiss, but we still have to beat all of the Cantonian gym leaders, and I hate to say it, but they end up causing some problems. I fought Sabrina first, figuring that she wouldn't be a problem since I have Shadow Ball. However, I'm not able to two-shot the Espeon, so it takes time to knock it out, and I lose some health. Then Mr. Mime also chips away at Togekiss before the Alakazam comes out. Not a great position for me. It goes for Psychic, doing a lot of damage. Remember, Shadow Ball is no longer physical in Generation 4, so I'm not doing a ton of damage to it every turn. It goes for Psychic a second time, bringing Togekiss down to 8 hit points, and then I'm able to knock it out. That fight was really close. Erica is much easier. I have Flamethrower, her Pokemon don't really stand a chance. Also, they all like to set up the sun because they have Chlorophyll as an ability. I don't care if they're faster than me if they're boosting Flamethrower's power. Now in HeartGold, the little plot line with the rocket doesn't work the same way that it does in Generation 2. You have to go into Misty's gym and pass by all of the random spinning trainers in order to get the machine part, and you also have to have talked to Misty all the way on Nugget Bridge as well as battled the rocket in that section of the game, so I'm kind of committed to fighting her next by the time I get here. Golduck is first. I go for Ancient Power, hoping for some Omni boosts. Unfortunately, I don't get any, and then it disables Ancient Power, so I have to knock it out with Psychic. I taught it in the place of Shadow Ball after I defeated Sabrina, since I don't think Ghost-type damage is really that useful anymore. She sends in Lapras next. I go for Flamethrower, but it's not doing very good damage. Then Lapras puts Togetic to sleep and starts using Ice Beam. The second one scores a critical hit, and well, that's it. I tried playing a little bit safer using Substitute against the Golduck, figuring it can't break my defense, but then Misty uses a healing item, so Golduck attacks multiple times, and it does break my Substitute before the Lapras comes in, and still the Ice-type damage is doing a lot. But with Ancient Power not disabled, I'm able to attack with this move and two-shot the Lapras, moving on to the Starmie. But Togetic's health is low, so her Ace just finishes me anyway. Okay, so I guess I'm backtracking out of Misty's gym despite not wanting to. Next, I'll try and fight Surge. This one's also terrible. I can't one-shot his initial Raichu, so it's able to go for Thunder Wave, paralyzing me right at the start of the fight, and because of the status condition, I'm not able to make it through his 4 other Pokemon. Luckily, I don't have to fight Surge or Misty now, so I can just catch myself the Snorlax, so I have access to the leftovers, and then take on Brock, who is really simple. Blaine is also not problematic, and of course I have Psychic for Janine, making her incredibly easy. With these battles completed, my Togetic's a higher level, so maybe it can beat Misty now. Throughout this playthrough, I have been getting so many Omni boosts with Ancient Power, but here against Misty, I attack the Golduck twice. No Omni boost. I did get a critical hit though. Then I attack the Lapras twice. Still no Omni boost. I continue using Ancient Power against the Starmie, and yeah, I just don't get any boosts in this battle. Maybe it would have been good to keep Shadow Ball just for the Starmie to knock it out more quickly so I wouldn't take damage from its use of Ice Beam, but without Psychic, I didn't have as good moves against Brock. That's why I wanted to replace Shadow Ball. I guess I could have just used Shadow Ball against him. Without it, I'm left in a bad position against the final Pokemon on her team, which is Quagsire. Luckily for me, it likes to go for Amnesia, setting up its special defense. But unluckily for me, I only have special moves, so it's still going to take some time to knock out. Also, she has a full restore, healing it. However, if it starts to attack, it only has Water Pulse or Earthquake, so it takes its time setting up with Rain Dance first, giving me more time to damage it. And because of that, I am able to win against Misty. Surge is still awful. I can use Substitute to block Thunder Wave. Should have done it turn 1, but I did it turn 2. It still worked out. Then against Electrode, this Pokemon breaks my Substitute, which is something that rarely happens. Electrode is typically incompetent in this fight, but today it set up both Light Screen and removed my defense, which is probably the most it's ever done in a battle. Also, I am once again not getting Omni boosts, and because of that, when I make it to the Electabuzz, Togetic's not in a great position. Electabuzz goes for Shockwave, dealing okay damage. I burn it, but its repeated uses of electric moves are just too much and Togetic faints. I wish I could say I came back into this fight with a better strategy, but Really, my plan here is just get an Omni Boost and hopefully be able to sweep all of Surge's Pokemon. I do pull it off, but Raichu breaks my substitute. That said, with the boost, I thought I could one-hit the Electrode, but no, I can't, so I get paralyzed anyway. Still, with the boost, I'm able to scrape through and get a victory this time. Okay, Blue is next, and his team is typically quite challenging to deal with. Although I don't think in HeartGold he's quite as good as he is in Pokemon Crystal. For whatever reason, his team here is just not as good as a lot of the Elite Four rematches, and it's nowhere near as good as Red's team. I've had problems in the past with his Executor going for Trick Room right away, but today that can actually help me out because I will outspeed the Arcanine and the Pidgeot, which I wasn't outspeeding by 1 point at the beginning of this fight. That said, once I knock out the Executor using Flamethrower, he sends in Rhydon next, which is now moving first against Togetic, and that's unfortunate. It breaks my substitute with Stone Edge and then does a lot of damage on the next turn before I knock it out with Psychic. Gyarados comes in, it's going for Ice Fang, also outspeeding, but luckily one use of Ancient Power is enough to knock it out. Now, I was not lucky enough to get an Omni Boost by this point, but I have super effective damage against the Machamp. I thought one Psychic would be enough, but Machamp hangs on with red health, goes for Dynamic Punch, confusing Togetic, then Blue uses a full restore, Togetic hits itself, and that's that. The next fight proved to me that I need one Omni Boost. If I get it, I'm going to one-shot the Machamp and everything is going to get so much easier. This time I did make it to the Arcanine, but then it roars out Togetic, which felt like a weird choice since I didn't have a boost. I actually had 2 Intimidates lowering my attack stat, so I guess it's switching me out because it sees that I have Ancient Power maybe, or that it doesn't have super effective moves against Togetic. Either way, I have to just switch back in and eat an Extreme Speed for free. Then it has priority on the next turn once again, and it can knock Togetic out. In the next battle, things line up the way they needed to. Omni Boost on the Gyarados, which gives me +1 special to one-shot the Machamp with Psychic and move on to the Arcanine with really good health. Then it roars Togetic out, but this doesn't matter since my health is so high this time. Blue uses a full restore, and my follow-up Ancient Power does enough to knock out the Fire type even without the boost. In this case, it's because I got a critical hit. He switched out the Executor earlier into the fight, which wasn't a behavior I was seeing before, so it comes back in and I can finish it easily. Then there's only Pidgeot to clean up, and of course it just takes 2 Ancient Powers. Okay, at long last, we have cleared all of the Cantonian gym leaders, and we can finally get access to Rock Climb. This lets me go back to the national park, climb up this little ledge, and pick up the shiny stone. With it, I can evolve Togetic into Togekiss. This evolution brings with it a massive base stat total upgrade. Togetic has 405, and Togekiss has 545. So its base stat total increases by 140 points when it evolves. Now it has 85 HP, 50 attack, 95 defense, 80 speed, which is pretty decent, 120 special attack, and 115 special defense. Togetic is honestly a monster, and when it gets the fairy type in later generation, it just becomes even better. Now, as a stone evolution, it has the weird quirk where it doesn't learn any new moves through level up, but it starts with 4 moves: Sky Attack, Extreme Speed, Aura Sphere, and Air Slash. The last of these 2 moves are special and honestly fantastic. Aura Sphere gives it fighting coverage against rock and steel type Pokemon, and Air Slash is a special flying type move, so I finally get to leverage the same type attack bonus. In order to get both of these moves, I have to pick up 2 Heart Scales, and in HeartGold, there are 2 of these available in the playthrough. One is just south of Violet City over here against this rock, and the other one is in Vermilion City on this boat. I use the move reminder to teach Air Slash in the place of Psychic and Aura Sphere in the place of Flamethrower. Now, I'm sure the Togekiss is more than ready to complete the Elite Four rematches. Serene Grace Air Slash is kind of broken, with a 60% chance to flinch the opposing Pokemon, and with my new base speed, I am faster than almost every Pokemon in the game currently. I'm not able to one-shot most of Will's Pokemon, even the Jinx survives, which is kind of annoying. That said, it doesn't really matter because Togekiss is so bulky, and his Pokemon just can't do enough damage. During this fight, Togekiss levels up to 84, and that gives it 191 speed, which is convenient for Koga, who's next. Surprisingly, his Crobat is the fastest Pokemon in the game, with 190 speed. So Togekiss is faster than everything. Also, he's got some fighting types, some bug types. Yeah, Togekiss is really set up for success here. I can also use Substitute to block his annoying status conditions. This fight's really easy. Because I have a Substitute and I recover health with the Shell Bell, by the end of the fight, Togekiss is full health and ready to take on Bruno. This one's also easy. Air Slash for the win against absolutely everything. Although I do miss against the Hitmonlee, then get confused because of Swagger and take massive self-inflicted damage, which brings Togekiss after one more hit down to orange health. That said, Air Slash continues to just sweep through the remainder of his team members, and I make it to the Lucario in a decent position. I didn't think that Air Slash would one-hit, and I was correct. The Lucario hangs on with red health. It goes for close combat, which is pretty much the best thing it could do. It does pathetic damage, so Bruno's defeated. Time for Karen. Before taking her on, I use my final 2 rare candies since I'm close to level 86, so I can go up over the next damage rounding threshold to level 88. A fighting type move here against her Pokemon is really convenient. I one-shot the Weavile, one-shot the Honchkrow with Air Slash, then Spiritomb comes out. It's really bulky, so it takes 2 hits to knock out, and then she sends in Umbreon. But with Aura Sphere, I can do absolutely massive damage to it. I'm not even needing to rely on Ancient Power and Omni Boosts at this point. I can just attack and Togekiss destroys everything. This Pokemon is so good. I wish I had been able to use it earlier on. Imagine if you could pick up the Shiny Stone in National Park when you were there the first time. As soon as you evolve your Togepi into Togetic, you could just evolve into Togekiss and then crush the rest of the game with it. Maybe it makes sense that Game Freak walled these Pokemon off in the late game. They could have just put the Shiny Stone somewhere like right after the Elite Four. I think that would have been appropriate if I'm being honest. Togekiss seems a little bit too overpowered for the first round of the Elite Four, but it just feels cruel to me to wall this Pokemon off so late in the game. Also, everyone always defends these games saying that they're for kids whenever Game Freak is making weird choices. Yeah, they're for kids. Why make it a difficult experience? Just let them use Togekiss early on. Okay, so with Karen out of the way, let's take on Lance again. This is often one of the most difficult battles, if not the most difficult battle in Pokemon HeartGold. One of the reasons this fight is so challenging is just because 2 of his Pokemon have Intimidate, and he tends to send them in one after another, ruining the chance for physical attackers. But with Togekiss, we don't care. We're a special attacker, and we're also using Ancient Power to knock out both the Salamence and the Gyarados, giving me chances for Omni Boosts. But this time around, I don't get them. Then I forget to use Substitute, Gyarados goes for Thunder Wave, and I'm paralyzed. Because of the status condition, I end up losing here. In the next fight, I get 2 Omni Boosts on the Salamence, and then I don't even need to set up Substitute against the Gyarados. I can just one-shot with Ancient Power, getting myself the 3rd Omni Boost of the fight. Air Slash proceeds to one-shot the Garchomp. Ancient Power destroys the Charizard, as well as the Ace Dragonite, leaving only Altaria, which of course also gets taken out by my Rock move. So Lance was not difficult, and that leaves only one more trainer for Togekiss. As I was climbing Mount Silver towards Red, I was trying to decide what the best strategy to take him on was. He leads with Pikachu, and it has Volt Tackle, which does disgusting amounts of damage. As a flying type, I'm not really liking my chances against it. There's also a Hailstorm on the summit. Sometimes you can get something called Diamond Dust, but I'm not playing with that enabled in my playthroughs. I wanted to make the Red battle as difficult as possible on every Pokemon. So because of Hail, his team has a bunch of users of Blizzard, which bypasses accuracy checks, and that's also very scary for Togekiss. So I need a way to play around all of these super effective moves. Obviously, Substitute doesn't make any sense on my set anymore since I'm not going to be able to set it up, so letting this go in favor of having Attract makes the most sense. This is going to take some luck, but I know it's going to be possible for Togekiss at level 90. Okay, so how much damage is Volt Tackle going to do in a single hit? Well, the answer is almost enough to one-shot. Togekiss survives the hit on 7 health, but that's not enough to survive the hail damage, which occurs before the leftovers heal. In the next battle, I find out that Volt Tackle also can roll enough damage to one-shot Togekiss, so as soon as the Pikachu goes for this move, I should just reset. What I'm looking for here is turn 1 Attract, because I am outspeeding the Pikachu. It has 189 speed, so it is 1 speed slower than Koga's Crobat. Because I can move move first, I'm ensured to attract the Pikachu so that it won't attack on some turns. Then, if I can Omni Boost, knocking it out with Ancient Power, I think that Togekiss should be able to sweep the rest of Red's team. But this Pikachu was determined to use Volt Tackle. It attacks over and over and over and over again, finishing Togekiss. Attract did not activate once during all of these fights. Now, I'm not sure if RNG seeds work exactly the same way that they do in Generation 1 and 2, so I'm walking around on the summit and trying to go to a different position, saving the game there and then fighting Red again. But no, the Pikachu just keeps hitting with Volt Tackle. By the time Attract activates, for the first time, Togetic had 10 resets against Red. 10 times Volt Tackle hit in a row, and that's when Attract is supposed to have a 50-50 chance of preventing the enemy Pokemon from attacking. Like, I am losing my mind. Alright, Serene Grace and Ancient Power, it's your time to shine. Please give me an Omni Boost. And I don't get one. Luckily, Attract activates, so I get another chance to roll for it. But still no Omni Boost. But because of type effectiveness, Red chooses to send in Lapras next because it has Blizzard. This move isn't doing nearly as much as Volt Tackle was. Roughly 1/2 every hit, and I think I might survive a second hit from Blizzard if it rolls low damage on both hits. In this case, I don't, so that's another reset, even though I made it by the Pikachu, but it wasn't in the ideal scenario with at least one Omni Boost. Pikachu Volt Tackles and knocks out Togekiss. I reposition my player character, but I also make a moveset change. I don't think that Aura Sphere is actually going to be that helpful, and I think it might be more useful to have Roost on my set, so that I can get rid of my flying type and take less damage from moves like Volt Tackle or Blizzard. Still though, if Pikachu attacks on turn 1, I'm going to lose. It's done this way too many times. Come on. Finally though, it gets caught in Attract, and then I'm able to use Ancient Power. This time Red uses a Full Restore, giving me more chances to use Ancient Power against the Pikachu for Omni Boosts. But after using the move 3 times, I still don't get one. That said, because of damage ranges from the Lapras, I know that I can use Roost here to heal, and it can only use Blizzard 5 times. So hopefully I can stall it out, and I might get an Omni Boost on the way using Ancient Power. In this case, I do, right as I knock the Lapras out and move on to the Snorlax. Now, I made a mistake here. I continued using Ancient Power, I have 1 more PP left, and then I realized I should probably use Air Slash because I can flinch the Snorlax and prevent it from going from Blizzard. While Snorlax has incredible special defense, the fact that I can flinch it and I'm doing decent damage, plus unlike in Generation 2 it does not have Amnesia, so it can't stack up its special defense. This makes it fairly manageable for Togekiss to knock out. But I made a mistake here. I got a little bit greedy. It was on low health, so I thought, well, I'll use my final PP of Ancient Power to knock it out and hopefully get 1 more Omni Boost. No, this was not the correct choice. I'll explain why in 1 second. Next, Blastoise comes in, but Air Slash is doing more than enough damage. I get a flinch on turn 1, then Red gets caught in a healing loop with full restores, and I knock it out for free. I didn't need to worry about its Blizzards. However, Charizard is next, and I don't have Ancient Power, so I'm not going to be able to one-shot, but I could flinch. Air Slash doesn't. Charizard goes for Flare Blitz. That said, I have an Omni Boost, but it doesn't matter, because Charizard scores a critical hit. However, Togekiss survives, but only with 3 hit points, and because of Hail it faints, so I'm not able to make it to the Venusaur. Are you kidding me? I lost that? Yeah, I did, because I used Ancient Power on Snorlax. That is so frustrating. Then Pikachu Volt Tackles. Yeah. Another fast loss. I assume that I'm going to have a bunch of these before I make it back into the later stages of the fight, but surprisingly, I didn't. I make it by the Pikachu on my very next fight, then I fight the Lapras, however it freezes me. No. Okay, so fighting Red again. This time actually no Volt Tackles. I make it back to the Lapras. This time around, I'm going for Roost. I'm able to stall it out, but I'm not getting Omni Boosts, and that's not ideal. I do need to raise my attack in order to have better chances against Pokemon like the Snorlax. Otherwise, they just take way too long to knock out. In this case, you can see that my Togekiss is going to knock it out in 4 hits using Air Slash. However, that's still kind of manageable. I've saved 1 PP of Ancient Power for the Charizard, and I might be able to flinch the Blastoise and pull through with a victory. But then Snorlax freezes Togekiss. Are you kidding me? Okay, back to the Volt Tackle lottery, and this one goes for quite some time. The resets are going to jump up from 68 to 76. Yeah, he got me a lot of times, but eventually I'm able to knock out the Pikachu, move on to the Lapras. Still, no Omni Boost at the beginning of the fight, which I felt was not very good, but I have learned I want to be using Attract against most of Red's Pokemon just to make them less consistent, especially when when I'm playing with Roost trying to stall them out. Togekiss squeezes in 1 boost before the Snorlax comes out, then Air Slash can 3-shot. Blastoise flinches once again. I've saved an Ancient Power for the Charizard. Togekiss is able to 1-shot. That leaves only Venusaur, and Air Slash gets the 1-hit. Togekiss has beaten Pokemon HeartGold. It did so with a real time of 3 hours, 39 minutes, and 34 seconds. It had 76 faults, consisting of 69 resets and 8 blackouts. It finished the game at level 90 with a game time of 10 hours and 34 minutes. Okay, I've got an exciting new tier list feature to show you, but before that, let's rank Togekiss. It was able to get a time under 3 hours and 45 minutes, so it is an F tier Pokemon. Honestly, not a very good performance, but I think most of that is not Togekiss itself. It's definitely Togepi at the beginning of the game slowing things down so much, and then Togetic being just kind of okay throughout the mid-game. If we started with Togekiss, I would expect that this is one of the Pokemon that's going to rank quite highly in the tier list overall. It is such an amazing Pokemon. Serene Grace is an excellent ability. It has fantastic base stats. Its moves are really good. Air Slash with a 60% chance to flinch just can't be underestimated. Also, I didn't mention it in this video or use it, but you can also get the King's Rock. This affects the flinch chance on Air Slash, and then it's again affected by Serene Grace, giving Togekiss a ridiculous 80% chance to flinch. Okay, so you're ready for the new feature that Weil added to the tier list? This is absolutely awesome. We can now bring up this list view, which shows all of the Pokemon ranked and all of their metrics so that we can compare things more accurately. This also lets us see some ridiculously close results. Togekiss was roughly half a minute faster than Donphan. The gap between it and Ursaring is quite a bit wider at roughly 10 minutes. However, I should mention that I needed to be level 100 with both Ursaring and Donphan in order to beat the game. Still, Togekiss's game time fits in neatly between the two, so I think this is the accurate ranking for it, at least for now, until I start playing the game as fully evolved Pokemon. When that happens, I assume that Togekiss is destined for one of the upper tiers. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, it means the world to me. Thank you so much. If you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.